Should the military allow members of the LGBT community to serve openly and in turn allow them to transition while on active duty? Should women be allowed to serve in combat arms MOSs? If so, who has the authority to make these decisions? Is it Congress? Is it the Secretary of Defense? What about those service secretaries? Should they have a say in this at all? And more importantly, what is the overall effects of these decisions? We're going to answer these questions and so much more on this episode of The First Branch. But before we get started with this episode, if loving your country, its military, and the Constitution are what you take pride in, heck, maybe you just like to hear another perspective, then show your support for all things America by hitting that subscribe button, tapping that bell icon, and giving this episode a good old-fashioned American thumbs up. And don't forget to leave a comment below. If you write it, I'll read it. In order to answer the questions I asked at the episode opener, we have to understand who has the authority to make which decisions. If this seems like a strange statement to make, let me pose a few more questions to help frame this context a bit more clear. Who, according to our Constitution, has the authority to declare war? And now think about who has the authority to sign treaties to end a war. If you know the answer to these two questions, then it becomes very clear that even when discussing the same event, there are two different authorities at play to define the scope of an action. Congress has the authority to get us into a war, yet a general has the authority to get us out of it. So who should be calling the shots on how the military should train and fight, and what should those decisions be based on? It is the muddling of this idea that has caused the greatest conflict within our own military. And in effect, it has done a great disservice in being instrumental in weakening her capabilities. And if you disagree, just ask the current SECDEF. China won't even take his calls. That right there is more telling than anything else I could share with any of the American public in this episode. But in order to fix these issues, we need to examine the reasons why this has happened in the first place. And that is what we're going to do throughout this series over the next few weeks. And in order to fix it, we must first define two things. Well, not really define them, but we need to remind the American people what authorities each branch of government has concerning the military, and what the role of the military actually is. Then we need to establish what morals our principles will be based on. And honestly, this is actually easier than you think. The authorities have already been defined, and as such, the relationship between these authorities is pretty well established. We've just forgotten our way. What we will discuss in this episode, as well as throughout the rest of the series, is not revolutionary. It's merely restorative, getting back to what has once made us back-to-back World War champions. I love our country. She is truly blessed. I count it an honor to have served her and defended her for over 25 years. And I long for those days of success and had pride in our military. And we here at the First Branch aim to get our military back on track. And how we're going to do this is by defining the relationship between Congress and the SECDEF, defining what the three objectives of our military actually are, and what is the moral glue that is going to hold these things together. Congress, as well as the President and the Secretary of State, are the diplomatic means by which war is prevented. That is why Congress is the only entity that has the ability to declare war. The President has to go to Congress and advise them diplomacy has failed. This failure now requires military intervention, and war needs to be declared. It is for this reason of diplomatic failure that military commanders have the authority to sign treaties. The politicians failed, so we, the military, had to come in and sacrifice our countrymen at the altar of national will. So it will be us that determines how the loser goes home. And that's the way it needs to be. Why? Because it should serve as the primary motivator to solve any issues diplomatically. Nobody likes to lose. I get it. All the more reason for diplomats to take negotiations seriously, rather than just view them as optics. This is what made Reagan such an exceptional president. He ended the Cold War and never had to commit our military to large force-on-force engagements with our enemies. Was he the perfect president? Absolutely not. but he was the best commander-in-chief we had since Abraham Lincoln. And we'll be discussing some of the critical decisions Lincoln made that were not popular, yet were vital to saving our nation and restoring our union in further episodes. Reagan understood more than any other commander-in-chief was the importance of the first objective of our military, and that is to deter. It is this deterrence that represents the only diplomatic influence the military should ever concern itself with. Our diplomats should have as a tool the ability to say, do you really want us to bring the weight of our military's might to bear in order to resolve this? Then let's sit down and work this thing out. Instead, we've gone from, I fear all we've done is awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with terrible resolve, spoken by Admiral Yamamoto, to China not even answering the phone when our SECDEF calls. This is a significant reduction in diplomatic power. And so what is the net effect of this loss of influence? Well, one of two things will be the result. We're going to find ourselves at war more often, or we'll simply be an afterthought on the world stage. This will no doubt affect our economic status in the world as well, since our money is based on trust and not on the value of gold anymore. Not just a simple solution of optics, is it? It is certainly deeper than that. And that's why it's important to understand this relationship and its effects when not managed the way that it was meant to be. The second objective of the military is to defend. Defend our own borders as well as those of our allies. And as it stands right now, we're doing okay. But is doing just okay? Well, that's what Putin is trying to find out right now. The Ukraine is not an official NATO member country, and that is why Putin is continuing to pressure the conflict in that area. It is also why he conducts training events near the Baltic countries. He's testing the diplomatic resolve of the United States. And when he sees that our country no longer is strong enough to stave off an invasion, he's going to seek to reestablish the old Soviet Union. And if that happens, what is there to stop China from finally committing to retaking Taiwan, an independent country and the only Republican form of government in Southeast Asia? Well, nothing. The third objective is to defeat our enemies on the field of battle, to close with and destroy the enemy. That is why this should be a last resort. But once politicians have failed, they should no longer be allowed to be a part of what it takes to win. What drives politicians is re-election. This idea has absolutely no place in war. They should have thought about that before they allowed negotiations to fail. But make no mistake about it, I am no warmonger. I truly believe that we are all created by our Lord and are fearfully and wonderfully made. And it should be the desire of every Christian to never have to raise their hand in battle. But if that day should come, then I will be swift with my justice and merciful with my judgment. That means I will engage only those that need to be engaged and target only those entities that participate. But it will be bloody, so that peace can resume as swiftly as the conflict arose. It is not the job of our military to be used to spread the idea of a Republican form of government to the rest of the world. That is the job of politicians and diplomats. Because national sovereignty is a real thing, and that right deserves to be protected as well. If a country wants to be ruled by communism, then they have that right. Go be a communist. Who are we to tell them that they can't be? Do they have the right to come over here and tell us that we need to be communist? Of course not. So in turn, we have no right to find an excuse to invade them because they're not a republic. And if we do invade a country because of diplomatic failure, then the outcome should never be to establish our form of government in their country, and then to keep our military there until they adopt it. Again, they have the right to national sovereignty. And what is happening in Afghanistan right now is immoral. We went there for the right reason, to capture a man who orchestrated an attack on our fellow countrymen. And he was met with the justice that he earned. Now it's time to bring our warriors home. It is not the job of our military to now establish a Republican form of government in that country, nor is it our responsibility to continue a presence for fear of them growing terrorists again. We brought bin Laden to justice. Now we get to withdraw in victory. Then it becomes the job of the diplomats again, and the entire process starts all over. And then maybe this time, politicians, as well as the American people, will not be so quick to have their loved ones shipped off to war where they can be killed because some politician cares more about optics. And that is where we, the American people, come in. Yep, all of us, my fellow Americans, it's our responsibility to vote people into office with the right moral compass to make these wise decisions. How important it is now to be informed of the truth and not only vote along party lines. You know, I couldn't resist. I had to take a shot at party politics. What can I say? I'm only human. So what is that moral thread that ties these objectives together? Well, there only needs to be one, but it's an important one though. And that is readiness. No other idea should be driving military decision makers at the national level other than readiness. If you apply this standard to those questions I asked at the top of the show, then you see they can be integrated. But the way they need to be integrated is through readiness. I don't care if the person in the foxhole next to me is gay or straight. In the fight, will they perform? The way to gauge that is by measuring by the same standard. And you don't need to reduce the standard so that more can make it. Set the standard and allow those that achieve to enter your ranks. End of story. And this brings us to the most recent memo published by the SECDEF concerning transgender soldiers transitioning while on active duty. Is this even a good thing? Well, the manner in which the SECDEF has prescribed allowing it, the answer is no. But there is a way to allow service members who wish to transition to serve and transition while on active duty. I'm going to take some time here to kind of plug my book again, because I answer this question in depth in Chapter 5 of my book, A Political Conscience, Rediscovering Values in American Politics. And the reason why it's important to allow them to serve will be discussed in detail in later episodes of this series. So I hope you will like and share this video with those who you know who are looking for solutions to this current administration's weakening of our military. It's going to be an awesome series that is not driven by party rhetoric. It is driven by the desire to get at the heart of the issues, place them in context, and discover the solutions that will lead to success. I look forward to seeing you in future episodes. And remember to leave your comments below. Have a great weekend, America, and God bless.